Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist. I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter.
Business editor and columnist Greg Jefferson.
Investigative reporter Brian Chasnoff.
And as our loyal listeners will note,
Both
this,
of them.
yeah, that's right. Thanks to our family members, but we're a little later this week for obvious reasons because we had the Texas primary on Tuesday, and we wanted to be able to talk to you all about what happened. Before we get into some of the details, I wanted to mention that Greg did a really awesome sort of like live video blog. What is that? Is that a vlog? What is that? What do we call that?
I would never call it a vlog, but it was actually a vlog.
Yeah, I've now,
with some writing interspersed
in the span
between
of
some video.
In the span of like 24 hours, I've used Joe Mentum and vlog in front of a microphone. So
I'm about to walk out of this studio.
Anyway, but it was a great series that Greg did, talking about the election night, and it was really awesome. Also wanted to mention, for those of you who've been following our Talking San Antonio series, we've been having these conversations with sort of local, sort of interesting people. We've got one coming up on Friday at the downtown Rosarios featuring U.S. Representative Joaquin Castro. He's going to help break down Super Tuesday for us. And it's at 12 noon. It's for subscribers, but there are all kinds of options out there if you're interested in a digital subscription. So that's my sales pitch. And we will now move on to election stuff. Before I get into the results, I want to talk about there did seem to be some unusual hiccups with the reporting of the results and maybe even the actual voting process. I mean, what did you all make of it?
Made it hard for the journalists.
Yeah, which is really the most important thing.
Which is to say, the public. I mean, citizens are incensed by this. Yeah, no, it took forever to get early vote results. Normally, we get them at 7:05. So almost as soon as the polls close, we get early voting results. Yesterday it was, 8:15?
Yeah, it was late. Like, you usually get them around 7:05, 7:15.
I had to eat an extra barbecue plate.
So
see what you made him do.
I know, yeah. And so there was a great wailing and gnashing of teeth among reporters because, hey, that really inconveniences our lives because it knocks back everybody's deadline, and we just want to know.
And then when they did release the result, they split them into two separate PDFs, one detailing the early vote, and then the other one,
and Gilbert
the
is the
election
exception
day.
to the rule. He is good at math. Most of us are not.
Late at night, somebody made me realize that they actually split them into three. They actually had absentee votes in a third one. And I was kind of hoping to, because we had a really close county commissioner race involving Chico Rodriguez, the incumbent, who is he going to be forced into a runoff, which he was, but it was really close. And so we were basically taking the election day results from one page and the early results from another page and absentee votes and combining them, and it was they've really got to work on that. I mean, they've got a new system apparently, and it's just not as user friendly.
Oh, it totally sucks.
Clearly.
Yeah, like one of my worst experiences in any newsroom ever came last night at about 10:30 when I came out of my office. I looked around and there was like a room full of reporters and editors doing math. And it's like, oh my God. I just had to turn around and go back into my office. Like, it never works out well.
Yeah, those crazy results came in literally 2 minutes before my deadline.
And so, I imagine you had to write quite a bit before. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, they call
a lot of vamping.
They call that B matter.
Yeah. Shirt tailing. Is that the? Let's get to some.
I was going to say, we seem to be on an insider baseball track. So
I don't think we have any listeners left, but so we can just kind of wing it from here. I want to talk about the races that you all covered. Josh, you covered the U.S. District 23 race, which for those who maybe aren't familiar, this has been a congressional swing district over the years. Will Hurd, the Republican, is decided not to seek another term, and this is a district that basically runs from South San Antonio up to El Paso County along the U.S. Mexico border. So what happened in District 23?
Well, Gina Ortiz-Jones, who came within 1,000 votes of Will Hurd last time, walked away last night with the Democratic nomination. She came out with, I think it was 65% as of this morning. So it was a total wash. The Republicans, however, appear to be headed for a runoff. Tony Gonzalez, Will Hurd's favorite to replace him, did not manage to avoid a runoff. He's facing a challenge from Raul Reyes, who's kind of further to the right.
More of a Tea Party guy.
More of a Tea Party guy. And, my main takeaway from that is, how valuable an endorsement from Hurd is. It does not get you out of the Republican primary.
Yeah, it's definitely like a double-edged sword to the Republicans. Will Hurd is. I think Tony Gonzalez is trying to navigate that sort of, or thread the needle as Will Hurd did, which is to find a way of appealing to independents and Democrats, because you need to do that if you're a Republican in a general election. But as you're pointing out, that it can keep you from even getting to a general election because Will Hurd was criticized by many Republicans for being, too critical of Donald Trump or not being sufficiently conservative. So I think that's going to be. I think Raul Reyes is really. They're both military veterans, but I think that Raul Reyes is going to push really hard to say I'm the true conservative in this race, and it's going to be interesting to see how Tony Gonzalez, who he's gotten a lot of support from, as you say, from Will Hurd and some other sort of establishment Republicans, but he doesn't really have a lot of experience in political campaigns.
And no matter who comes out of the Republican primary, it's going to be a race between two veterans. That district likes their military veterans.
Yeah, it's interesting though. With Gonzalez, you've got. You can understand why Will Hurd endorsed him. Military experience, intelligence experience. He is. If he's the Republican nominee, it'll be an interesting race to see because Gina Ortiz-Jones also. She comes from an intelligence background. National security is going to be a big deal. At least to the candidates, like maybe not necessarily to district voters, but this is in keeping with Will Hurd. That's right. He tried to, cut a profile in national security and international relations. Did a good job with it. Like he got a lot of national media play. I don't know how that translates in the district though. So we'll see how that works out.
And I think that even Republicans, I think, will privately say that it's going to be a really tough race for whoever the nominee is in beating Gina Ortiz-Jones. She came very close to defeating Will Hurd, and I think a lot of people would say that when he decided not to seek a fourth term, he had really, he had outlasted, or exceeded the shelf life of most District 23 members of Congress. That district has gone back and forth, repeatedly, and Will Hurd was able to get 3 consecutive terms and had an incredibly close race with Gina Ortiz-Jones, and I think he probably got out at the right time for him. So she's really set up, I think, to win this, and it's going to be tough for any Republican. Brian, you were looking at the really interesting county commissioner race. What was happening there?
Well, overall, the Rickhoffs had a good night.
Yeah, because really good night to be a Rickhoff.
Yeah.
Jerry came away with it on the Republican side for sheriff. And then his brother, Tom, who the former probate judge, whose career in politics actually stretches back to the 1970s, he came away with the most votes for Precinct 3 commissioner alongside Trish DeBerry. So they're headed for a runoff. Trish DeBerry, of course, who was on this show, public relations.
Has a lot of the business support. She's probably raised by far the most money. I don't remember exactly what his fundraising was, but I think it was minimal.
It was less than $4,000.
Yeah, it was basically a bake sale, probably, or maybe barbecue plates.
Those were some good cookies, by the way.
But he's like the Bloomberg of Bexar County because he loaned himself $40,000.
Right.
So.
Yeah, one of the interesting.
Just kidding.
Oh yeah. A bunch of opposition researchers, their ears just pricked out.
I was going to say, did he win American Samoa? Okay.
Yeah, the interesting dynamic there is, how close Trish DeBerry is to County Judge Nelson Wolff, a Democrat. They've been allies for years. And Rickhoff, who ran against Nelson Wolff in 2018, he didn't even try to disguise his disdain for Wolff. So I got to think that Nelson Wolff is going to play probably a fairly large role, whether he chooses to or not, in this runoff.
That's right.
Yeah, you got to imagine Nelson does not want Mr. Rickhoff to join the commissioner's court.
Yeah, this is a Republican seat. It's going to be a Republican, but Trish DeBerry is somebody who's probably going to be able to, work with the other team and Rickhoff is just going to come in and say this is just this institution is corrupt and everything.
He ran a really caustic campaign against Nelson Wolff 2 years ago, complaining of not only waste and overspending, but also outright corruption. I mean, he claimed there was corruption.
And this is a real potential comeback for him because, I mean, I was kind of reminded last night of how many elections the Rickhoffs have won between them over the years. I mean, they've had a lot of success, but not so much recently. And Tom Rickhoff, left the probate court and then decided to run for county judge. And it was a really it seemed like kind of a bizarre move because he had no chance. So it looked like that's the way his political career is going to end. And now he's in a position where he has a chance to make it to commissioner's court. So that I think is going to be really interesting to follow. I wanted to get a chance to I think kind of tie together what we saw in the presidential race with what we saw in U.S. District 28, which includes Bexar County. It's a Democratic seat that's been held by Henry Cuellar, a centrist from Laredo. He's been there for, I believe, 14 years, 16 years, and he has been. A lot of Democrats over the years have complained about him. He's voted with Republicans too often. His opponent in this race, Jessica Cisneros, who is a 26-year-old immigration attorney, who was kind of sponsored by the Justice Democrats, who also kind of helped Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pull off an upset in New York a couple of years ago. She called Henry Cuellar, Donald Trump's favorite Democrat, and I think this was really kind of an interesting test case where we got to see the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which was represented by Jessica Cisneros, versus Henry Cuellar, who's this kind of old line centrist who was basically saying, well, I'm representing my district. It's a moderate district. One of the things that I heard mentioned in this race was the fact that Jessica Cisneros, for example, favored a fracking ban, and whereas more moderate Democrats like Henry Cuellar would say, well, maybe we ought to tweak it or try to maybe regulate it a little bit more, but we don't want to affect people's jobs in South Texas. So these are some of the issues that came into play, and Jessica Cisneros really, I think, had a pretty amazing performance. She lost, but got more than 48% of the vote against a really powerful congressman who had Nancy Pelosi come down to his Laredo headquarters in a show of support. He's been representing Laredo for more than 34 years, I believe, going back to his time in the state legislature. His brother is the sheriff in Webb County. His sister is the tax assessor collector there. They were all on the ballot on the same day. Everybody knows that family. And she's basically barely out of law school and almost beat him. So what does this tell us about the Democratic Party?
What I think is it's an interesting test case to see if you can export the kind of race that AOC ran, in these safe blue districts. Right. And, I think the takeaway is, maybe. I mean, you got pretty close.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wonder if this is kind of the high water mark for progressives, at least in that part of South Texas. I mean, Laredo, who was the last, radical progressive that Laredo produced?
I don't think they have, yeah.
Yeah, like sent to Austin or to Washington. I mean, it just doesn't happen. It is a politically moderate city with some real kind of conservative strains to it. Mm-hmm. And Henry Cuellar has been, I mean, apart from his family's really deep roots in the city and the fact that they're just used to voting for Henry Cuellar, I mean, he is a very business-oriented conservative Democrat. And this is a city that lives and dies by international trade. He's been, Henry, I seem to get like a dozen emails from Henry Cuellar's office every day about small business stuff, trainings, updates on USMCA, the new NAFTA,
which he supported very strongly.
Yeah, exactly,
Although
exactly.
It's notable that Bernie Sanders did very well along the border, right?
Yeah.
So there's support for that wing of the party down there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not in Laredo, though. Not in this race.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing.
That hasn't. Yeah, he had no coattails.
Because the argument against him from Democrats was, look, this is a safe Democratic district. We don't need to have. It isn't like District 23 where we have to find somebody who can appeal to Republicans' independence and has to just. We could have a real Democrat, but as you're saying,
that's the AOC logic.
That's the AOC logic, but as you said, Laredo is kind of it's a separate sort of. animal there when it comes to politics, and it's very Latino and very, very democratic, but it's also socially conservative in some ways. And you said very, very pro-business, as you said.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things that was really interesting to me about this is you saw Bexar County makes up a fairly small part of that district, and it's basically the east part of San Antonio is kind of cut into District 28, and I think it's about 15% of the vote in District 28. But Jessica Cisneros did really well, and in early voting, I was kind of looking at how she's doing as compared to Bernie Sanders. How is her fate tied to his, because she's very much a Bernie Democrat, and she had the endorsement of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Elizabeth Warren and so on. How
Julian Castro
got behind him in the last couple of weeks. So I thought, well, how does her performance matching up with how Bernie Sanders is doing in various parts of the district? Now, in early voting, Bernie Sanders carried Bexar County by nearly 2-1 over Joe Biden, and she did about the same over Cuellar in Bexar County. But on Election Day, with Biden suddenly resurgent, we saw him actually carry Bexar County over Bernie Sanders, while she basically continued what she did in early voting. She won Bexar County handily over Cuellar, and I was talking to somebody earlier this morning who was saying, if Cuellar intends to stay in Congress much longer, he's probably going to make every effort he can to cut Bexar County out of the district, because if there were some more Bexar County votes in there, he might have not survived. It was he won by a couple of thousand. So I think that's really interesting that she was able to outperform Bernie Sanders on Election Day, which suggests to me that she sort of really had her own sort of independent base of support that had grown. And she's 26 years old. I mean, I don't know what her plans are, but you'd have to think she's going to be a factor in South Texas politics going forward. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to get to a couple of other races that dealt with people that we've written about quite a bit in the paper.
Josh really wants to talk about Robert Morrow, though.
Oh
no, I do not. Let us move past that.
Okay, well, that might be for another day. But Robert Morrow is he's running for State Board of Education, and he's a former Travis County Republican chair, and he's
vulgar to put it.
Yeah, he's
in ways that we can maybe not talk about.
There are probably things that we can't talk about, but he's the Republican Party in Travis County wanted him out as county chair and found a way to get him out, and I think they're going to try to do everything they can to keep him from getting. To winning the run. What was it that Matt Makoviak, the Travis County chair, said?
He promised to set himself on fire if Morrow wins the runoff, I believe.
Yeah. This is beyond the Joe Namath, we're going to win, I guarantee it. I mean, when you're saying, I'm going to set myself on fire if we lose this thing.
No, Makoviak hates that dude. So.
And we should say that Matt Makoviak succeeded him as county chair in Travis County. I want to talk about a couple of candidates that we've focused on a lot in the paper. One is... our Celia Trevino, who's the judge of the 386th District Court, which is the juvenile court here. Both the editorial board and Liz Zavala, who covers the courts for us, others have written about her history. She, just in the past couple of months, threw a couple of prosecutors out of her court, which for... reasons that were kind of sketchy. The thinking was maybe that they were supportive of her opponent because her opponent was a prosecutor.
And it worked.
And and so she threw them out. There were also a lot of questions about her absenteeism and just overall conduct on the court. And she ended up losing.
Oh, so it didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay.
But well, it worked in the sense that she was able to have him thrown out of court, but it did not.
It did not produce the desired outcome.
No,
right. Won the battle, lost the war. She was challenged by Jackie Valdez, who works in the district attorney's office, and Jackie Valdez, I think it was about a 60-40 margin there. So I think one of the things that was interesting to me about the race is that. I wouldn't say there was an anti-incumbency strain, but there were some just isolated cases where it looked like the voters really took special note of things like Chico Rodriguez is in a runoff. Right. There have been a lot of questions like how much has he really done on Commissioner's Court, and people really looked at that. Mm-hmm. Justin Rodriguez did fine, but the people looked at Chico Rodriguez and the Commissioner's Court and said, I don't know about this. And with Arcelia Trevino, often with down ballot races, people just don't have a chance to really investigate the record of the candidates, and it looked like people really took a look at this one.
Perhaps people are reading the newspaper.
No,
maybe.
Yeah.
Although I got to think, when she threw those prosecutors out of her court, it seemed like kind of very unjudicial for one thing.
Right.
But apart from that, also kind of desperate, just like politically desperate. Like she had to have understood. It seems that she might have been in trouble. Like her campaign was not taking hold.
So it wasn't a cause, but maybe a symptom of the
right?
problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it also shows a huge lack of judgment, also, which is a great argument for
she'd already been
not reelecting her.
She'd already been put on blast by our editorial board for her conduct in the courtrooms. So.
Right. And then another person that we've written a lot about, and Brian, I think you've done some great stuff on this person, Michelle Barrientos Vela, who was the former constable and is under indictment right now.
Didn't she still come in third though?
Yeah, but she didn't win, and she was running for sheriff. She was trying to fail upwards from the constable's office to the sheriff's office, and it was
got name ID.
It was a gutsy move. I've got to give her that. It's like I'm being investigated, and I'm probably going to be indicted. And hey, I'm running for sheriff. Right. So, so that didn't work. So I don't know if the newspaper coverage and there was TV coverage also of some of her antics played a part in that. But
right, she certainly got herself in front of the camera a lot, and I don't know if that played a role, but yeah, she's been accused of tampering with evidence, official oppression. She's been indicted for these things. Some of them connected it to an incident where she allegedly extorted money from people in a park on Easter, and she was trying to throw her political opponent in jail on a trumped-up charge of.
So a lot of earned media is what you're talking about.
It's really impressive. But I have to say, and all of the, I don't know how I can really pick between some of all these different allegations, but the one which you wrote about, you broke that story about her, the way she was basically allegedly trying to shake people down at the park on, was it Easter Sunday or something?
Yeah.
I don't know why that struck me as the most egregious, because it was just such a complete abuse of the office. And
she wanted a pavilion, and there was a family there who had reserved this pavilion a year in advance, and she said, fine, but you got to pay me to provide security. You have to pay me to provide security, even though the county was already funding security for every county park. So it was just, it was ridiculous.
Yeah. We're also looking at a runoff in the state Senate race, Senate District 19, which is held by Pete Flores, a Republican, but there's a good chance it could flip back to the Democrats. It's been a Democratic seat, and it's one of those South Side grudge matches. We got Xochitl Peña Rodriguez, daughter of former Congressman Ciro Rodriguez, and the niece of Chico Rodriguez, the county commissioner, running against Roland Gutierrez, the state representative. So that will be, and that's going to be one we're going to talk about that a lot more in the weeks to come. We had both of them, I think, on the podcast, I believe. But I want to wrap things up with kind of looking at what's going on in the presidential race, because we saw all the predictions were in the days leading up to Super Tuesday that Bernie Sanders was going to win the Texas primary, and if it had just been early voting, he probably would have.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, he was, if they could have just stopped voting in the early voting period,
right before,
he totally would have carried the day. But if you look at the election day results, clearly, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar's endorsements were helpful to Biden.
Beto O'Rourke, taking him to Whataburger and so.
Gag, but yeah.
Hey, I just want to throw this out.
Are you anti-Whataburger?
I love Whataburger. I just
Chicago
don't think
company.
it should be bastardized for politics.
For the gimmick.
It's too pure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be upset about this because the Biden campaign, I believe it was the official Biden campaign, or it may have been somebody who was just a strong supporter of his, but I think it was the campaign, actually posted last night the Whataburger logo, the W, and it said, "What a Biden." And so that's just.
And this is why we should be able to sue political candidates. Cut that stuff out.
So the thing is, I kind of have always had this belief that sometimes in presidential races, we'll say, oh, so-and-so has the momentum, or the momentum is shifting someone, so-and-so. When really it's just that maybe the primary schedule got better for him. Now we're getting, maybe Iowa and New Hampshire were bad for Joe Biden. They're very white states. And now we're getting into more diverse states, and it's better. So I had that sort of attitude that we're maybe a little he's suddenly resurgent, but maybe it's just the map is better for him now.
Right.
Having said all that, what we saw, and which you talked about, with the early voting versus the election day voting, and we're seeing that in California and some of these other states that had their primaries, where Biden was losing, and then he ended up pulling out victories or doing a lot better on election day. That suggests to me that something did happen, that people did. Yeah. Opinions did start to shift.
Exactly. I mean, Joe Biden is probably now thinking about building his retirement home in South Carolina because, that was his turning point. I mean, that's right. He needed to win decisively there. He did, and everything kind of broke his way after that. I mean, that's, the endorsements poured in, and he had a lot of momentum going into, and I'm not going to say momentum.
I know.
Not.
I've already.
But heading into.
Well, you just did.
Heading into Super Tuesday. And I mean, you could just see, you saw it on election day results in San Antonio.
Yeah. And so it's, look, it's probably going to be a two-person race. It's probably him and Bernie Sanders. And neither one of them is, anywhere close to being where they have to get. I mean, we've got a long way to go. I think the feeling was that the Super Tuesday states were sort of, geared more toward Bernie Sanders. He had the potential to win big in California. It's probably going to be a little closer than we initially thought. He looked like he was going to win Texas, which he didn't. So if you're Joe Biden, you're probably thinking that was going to be a rough night for me. I just wanted to get through that, and I actually won 9 out of 14 states. So I think if you're in the Biden camp, you have to feel better about things than Bernie Sanders does. But at the same time, what I'm wondering is really, what are the Bernie Sanders supporters going to do if he doesn't get the nomination? Because I have the feeling that uniting the party would not be easy if Joe Biden gets the nomination.
Right.
Yeah. Agreed?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, and I kind of look at it from a different angle. You kind of look at the way the last 4 years have gone, and you look at, how, Trump just came in and he didn't shift the Overton window. He demolished it. Like, he completely just blew open the field of, possible political, possibilities, essentially, right? And, and it's been interesting to watch basically the Democrats do all of this hand-wringing over, whether they essentially want to take advantage of that and, put in somebody who's going to be sort of this hardline progressive, or instead, kind of blink and walk back from that. And I think that's, it depends on who gets the nomination. But I think there's going to be a lot written about just did Democrats kind of miss an opportunity here to sort of deliver on sort of the innate promise of the party? Yeah.
It seems to me like the young energy and the passion in the party is with young voters, and we saw that with Jessica Cisneros, and we've seen it to some degree with Bernie Sanders supporters. But at the same time, you have older, more traditional Democrats who are thinking that platform is a little too far left,
and suburban voters really went for Biden. And
suburban, and so that's really going to be I think as the Democratic Party defines itself going forward, it's going to be You're going to need that young energy to drive up turnout and to win races, but there's the fear from other Democrats that in doing so you're going to turn off too many people.
I would say one bad sign if Joe Biden ultimately wins the nomination and is going to need to rely on Bernie supporters.
Yes.
One really bad sign is I'm looking at how the Dow Jones Industrial Average and S&P are doing. They love the fact that
doing well.
Yeah,
today?
They're doing great. Yeah, they are thrilled that the Stop Bernie movement is working so far. So, and that's not going to help unify the party.
Yeah, I think that is very true. Well, on that note, we're gonna leave you, and thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Take care.